Welcome to my channel. My name is Rainer and this is Rainierbooks. It is November very soon and it's time for Nonfiction November. Many of you read non-fictional books this November, so I thought I'd give you the top 10 non-fiction books to read in November of 2020 out of my own personal experience. Most of them I've read, some of them I haven't read. Let's get started directly. The first book that I want to recommend to you that I have bought 4 years ago, I think, in London, England. It's called This is London by Ben Judah. Ben Judah is a young journalist from London, has lived in Russia, I think, and he has written a book about Russia, but he has written one book about London, This is London in 2016, which is an amazing account of this enormous city, this one of the great metropoles in the world. This is London. London is a city that has changed dramatically over the last decades. Let me look at my notepad here to give you some numbers. In the last 40 years, London has, the white population in London has been reduced from 86 to 45%. And 40% of Londoners today are born abroad somewhere else. So The Guardian has called this book by Ben Judah an epic work of reportage. And how is he working his way to portray, how is he doing this portrait of London? This is London. It is a portrait, it's like a mosaic, because Ben Judah has gone to a lot of these different parts of London that form the city, and has visited a lot of immigrants, have visited a lot of people, and has lived with them, has talked with them, has eaten with them, has even spent the night together with them in the very first chapter when he sleeps with 16 Roma beggars in a tunnel in Hyde Park, a street corner, over the night, and to learn what their dreams were and how their reality is before they came. It's a lot of talk about the American dream, of course, as we all know, but there seems to be also a sort of London dream in the world for people from very distant countries who live in great poverty and great distress to come to London and to start a new beautiful life there. Many of these dreams are not coming true, and people still live in a lot of poverty in London, and some of them are rich. And this is what Ben Judah is depicting in this book, where he goes to all the different parts of London, like Knightsbridge, which is one of the richest parts, not only in London, but probably in the whole world. He also visits Ilford, Harleston, Elephant and Castle, which is my area where my heart is, in south of the center of London, even Peckham, where I've been, I think, last year, and stayed overnight, a very Afro-British and Caribbean part of the city of London. All those parts of London are portrayed in this amazing book that I have actually recommended to a lot of people, even to Londoners who live in London. And I'm always anxious to hear what did you think about the book. And some of the people I recommended the book to have told me, I bought this book for a couple of friends. I already bought this book for a couple of friends and gave it as a present to them. So this is really a great book. Ben Judah, This is London. The second book I would like to talk about is also a book that has really touched me as much as This is London, definitely. I think it's the Pulitzer Prize winner of 2017, and this is Evicted by Matthew Desmond. Matthew Desmond is a white Harvard sociologist who has done an incredible case study that is called Evicted: Poverty and Profit in the American City. I have mentioned this book earlier, I think in comments and maybe even on my channel. So how many people in the United States do get evicted when we don't have pandemics going on? There's a number of 2016 that Matthew Desmond has researched, And he says in an interview that in an average year in 2010, 2014, 2016, around 900,000 to 1 million households get evicted. 2.3 million people in the United States get evicted on a yearly basis, many of them children. And this book is a masterpiece. Desmond has in the year after the financial crisis, in 2008, 2009, he went to Milwaukee in Wisconsin, which is a city that is kind of representative for many populations in the United States. Matthew Desmond went to Milwaukee in Wisconsin and has followed the lives of people who get evicted, and he has followed the lives of landlords over the course of a whole year. And you meet these people here in this book. You meet the family, for example, that gets evicted because one of their children has asthma and has to go to the hospital a couple of times, and the family gets evicted because the ambulance is coming too often to their house. You can meet the people who get evicted because a little boy throws a snowball on a car in the beginning of this book. This is horror. This is really, this is reality. This is Profit and Poverty in the American City by Matthew Desmond, who has done really a masterpiece of researching this topic. And he also, in the last chapter, shows a path, shows a possible way of getting out of this catastrophe. Whoever has been in the United States, from Europe, from a European country, has certainly realized how many homeless people there are in California, in Oregon, but also in New York. There's an enormous homelessness, and there's a homeless crisis that really, of course, this year in the election campaign, nobody talks about because everybody's talking about COVID-19. And this is a very urgent question, I think, that very often gets forgotten when you see the amount of people who are living on the streets. But Evicted also picks up questions of race. There is one sentence that really never left my mind when I read the book Evicted by Matthew Desmond, when he comes to the conclusion and says somewhere in the book, black men are sentenced to jail and go to jail, and black women get evicted. This is the second recommendation on my list. Second recommendation on my list of 10 nonfiction books you should read in November of 2020. The third nonfiction book, I read it actually on a plane flight to Tokyo, Japan last year, almost a whole book. This is Alex Kotlowitz, An American Summer, Love and Death in Chicago from 2019. The numbers are staggering over the past 20 years in Chicago. 14,033 people have been killed and another roughly 60,000 wounded by gunfire. What does that do to the spirit of individuals and community? Drawing on his decades of experience, Alex Kotlowitz set out to chronicle one summer in the city. Writing about individuals who have emerged from the violence and whose stories capture the capacity and the breaking point of the human heart and soul. The result is a spellbinding collection of deeply intimate profiles that upend what we think we know about gun violence in America. Among others, we meet a man who as a teenager killed a rival gang member, and 20 years later is still trying to come to terms with what he has done. A devoted school social worker struggling with her favorite student who refuses to give evidence in the shooting death of his best friend. The witness to a wrongful police shooting who can't shake what he has seen, and an aging former gang leader who builds a place of refuge for himself and his friends. Applying the close-up, empathic reporting that made There Are No Children Here a modern classic, Alex Kotlowitz offers a piercing, honest portrait of a city in turmoil. These sketches of those left standing will get into your bones. This one summer will stay with you. And it actually stayed with me. I read that book, as I said, on a plane ride to Tokyo in Japan, and it brought me to tears. It made me angry, and it brought me to tears to read the story of, for example, the two teenagers. Most of the victims and most of the perpetrators are black, and this happens in a lot of poverty in Chicago, what we're talking about. And I remember the story of the two kids, two Afro-American kids, a boy and a girl, They are like 13, 14 years old, sitting somewhere in the south side of Chicago, and Alec Kotlowitz tells their story, and suddenly they hear gunshots ring out, and the boy runs away. He runs away, runs for his life, and then when he thinks he's in safety, he looks back and he wonders, where's my friend? Where's my friend? She's lying there, bleeding to her death. This is so heartbreaking, so angry, such young lives end for nothing. There's no sense in this violence, and the reason, how do we change this? Of course, is always a question that lures in the background, and we don't change it to send the army into those ghettos and into those poor and deprived cities. We only can change things if we help the people to live more decent, educated lives, give them good education, give them a meaning, and give them a chance in society. An American Summer by Alex Kotlowitz is definitely a book that you should. Alex Kotlowitz is definitely a book that you should read during the Nonfiction November that's coming now. This year I read Masha Gessen's Surviving Autocracy, and I raved about it, as you might know. It is a book where Masha is warning for an autocracy that is in the making in the United States. If President Trump gets re-elected, the path to autocracy might be paved, and might be no way back. Surviving Autocracy. But 4 years earlier, Masha Gessen won the National Book Award in the United States for their book, The Future is History, How Totalitarianism Reclaimed Russia. I have not read this one. I have it on my Kindle, I have it as an ebook, and I definitely have to read it. So maybe I pick up a few chapters of it in November. I read the summary of the publisher here. Award-winning journalist Masha Gessen's understanding of the events and forces that have wrecked Russia in recent times is unparalleled. In The Future of History, Gessen follows the lives of 4 people born at what promised to be the dawn of democracy. Each of them came of age with unprecedented expectations. Some as the children and grandchildren of the very architects of the new Russia. Each with newfound aspirations of their own as entrepreneurs, activists, thinkers and writers, sexual and social beings. Gessen charts their path against the machinations of the regime that would crush them all, and against the war it waged on understanding itself, which ensured the unobstructed emergence of the old Soviet order in the form of today's terrifying and seemingly unstoppable mafia state. Powerful and urgent, The Future is History is a cautionary tale for our time and for all time. This is Masha Gessen, which is my number 4 on the list of top 10 books you should read in Nonfiction November. Let's get to number 5. On 9/11/2001, terrorists attacked the United States, destroyed the towers of the World Trade Center, flew into the Pentagon, and landed and crashed on an airfield in Pennsylvania. 4 planes were hijacked, hundreds, thousands of people died, and the aftermaths were extreme for the whole world. Either you're with us, either you're with the terrorists, or you're with us, said President George W. Bush at the time. And a war was waged, a war against Afghanistan to find Osama bin Laden, who was soon found out to be the architect behind those attacks on the United States. Another war followed, a war against Iraq, and many warlike incidents all over the world where thousands, tens of thousands, and hundreds of thousands of people died, and the world was reshaped. Everything was reshaped. The war on terrorism was not only followed in Afghanistan, Iraq, or Syria, it was also waged in the United States, in Germany, in Belgium, in the UK. The times, how do we call these times that we have lived through after the attacks of the 11th of September in 2001? How will this time be called? That's the question that the British journalist and correspondent Jason Burke asks himself. And he said maybe this time might be called the 9/11 Wars. And that's his almost encyclopedic title that he published a couple of years ago that I have read partly. It's a really, it's like a brick. You could really knock out someone with this book. It's a great book by one of the leading experts on this topic of terrorism and about the reaction of the West. Jason Burke has worked for the Guardian newspaper in the United Kingdom. The 9/11 Wars is highly, highly recommended. And David Treuer, who actually, I think he has also German ancestors, but he has also Native American ancestors. David Treuer is one of the most accomplished and most well-known and most important nonfiction authors about Native Americans today. He has written a book that that was nominated for the National Book Award of 2019. And this is The Heartbeat of Wounded Knee, Native America from 1890 to the present, where David Treuer wants to show that Wounded Knee didn't end the life and culture of Native Americans in the United States, that still they are resilient and they are still existing, and they still try to do their best to struggle their best. The received idea of Native American history, as promulgated by books like D. Brown's best-selling book, Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee in 1970, has been that American Indian history essentially ended with the 1890 massacre at Wounded Knee. Not only did 150 Sioux die at the hands of the US cavalry, the sense was that native civilization died as well. Growing up Ojibwe on a reservation in Minnesota, training as an anthropologist and researching native life past and present for his nonfiction and novels, David Treuer has uncovered a different narrative, because they did not disappear, and not despite, but rather because of their intense struggles to preserve their language, their traditions, their families, and their very existence. The story of American Indians since the end of the 19th century to the present is one of unprecedented resourcefulness and reinvention. The Heartbeat of Wounded Knee, Treuer melds history with reportage and memoir. Tracing the tribe's distinctive cultures from first contact, he explores how the depredations of each era spawned new modes of survival. The Heartbeat of Wounded Knee is the essential, intimate story of a resilient people in a transformative era. So, number 7 is a book that I haven't finished yet. I have to admit it right away. But I want to. It's on my never-ending TBR. And this is a book that I received as a used book from the UK. I bought it in the UK, and I think it won the National Book Award a few years ago. This is called Age of Ambition, Chasing Fortune, Truth and Faith in the New China by Ivan Osnos. Here it is, hardcover edition. I'm very proud to have this one on my list of 10 nonfiction books that you should read in November. China, it's about China. From abroad, we often see China as a caricature, a nation of pragmatic plutocrats and ruthlessly dedicated students destined to rule the global economy, or an adult Goliath riddled with corruption on the edge of stagnation. What we don't see is how both powerful and ordinary people are remaking their lives as their country dramatically changes. As the Beijing correspondent for the New Yorker, even Osnos was on the ground in China for years, witness to profound political, economic, and cultural upheaval. In The Age of Ambition, he describes the greatest collision taking place in that country, the clash between the rise of the individual and the Communist Party's struggle to retain control. He asks probing questions. Why does a government with more success lifting people from poverty than any civilization in history choose to put strict restraints on freedom of expression? Why do millions of young Chinese professionals fluent in English and devoted to Western pop culture consider themselves angry youth dedicated to resist the West's influence? How are Chinese from all strata finding meaning after 2 decades of the relentless pursuit of wealth? Writing with great narrative verve and a keen sense of irony, Osnos follows the moving stories of everyday people and reveals life in the new China to be a battleground between aspiration and authoritarianism, in which only one can prevail. It's a very exciting book, a very great book about a country that we have to learn more about China, which is on its way competing with the United States to be the most powerful economy and the most powerful country in the world. Number 8 is a book that I already have raved about in this on my YouTube channel in 1, 2, or 3 videos. This is The National Road by Tom Zoellner, which actually was published this month. And The National Road is Dispatches from an Ever-Changing Country, I think is the subtitle of the book. Is a book where Tom Zoellner has collected a lot of essays that he has written over the last couple of years about the United States, where he visits the Mormons' holy grounds in several states, where he visits, where he speaks about his relentlessly driving through the whole country. And he has seen so much, he knows so much about the United States. He has been to California, to Los Angeles, and is in a small part of Los Angeles. About, I think, 70% of all porn movies are being shot. And Tom Zoellner takes us backstage and writes about the people who do this kind of movies, and also the people who rent their houses to the production companies. And he also shows us. He also tells the story in another essay about a very cheap grocery chain in the United States that doesn't move to areas where rich people live, but only where poor people live, and how they sort of expel all the small shops that exist in those areas, how they change the areas where they are establishing their shops. I think it's dollar store. Tom Zoellner, The National Road, is a book about America that is very, very timely. You will read it with a lot of joy and a lot of astonishment, I think, about certain parts of this picture that he is painting of America in the year of 2020. Number 9. I haven't read it yet. I got it only about a week ago from the UK. Is The Twilight of Democracy by Applebaum. The Seductive Lure of Authoritarianism, published in 2020. This is a very, I was surprised that it's such a small book, such a tiny book, look. And I think it has only like 200 pages. And this is, I know this is a very personal book by Anne Applebaum. She was in a party apparently, I think 25 years ago in London. And she met lots of people, and many people who were on that party drifted to the right and drifted more to authoritarianism in the decades that followed after this party. And one of the people that she actually met on this party is current Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Mr. Boris Johnson. And this is about him and about other, even Polish conservative people. Number 10 on my list of nonfiction, the top 10 nonfiction books that you should read in November. But when I ask you what happened on the 22nd of July, 2011, I'll give you 5 seconds. You might not know this, don't you? Horrible things happened on the 22nd of July in 2011. There was a very young Norwegian man. He was blonde and blue-eyed. His name was Anders Behring Breivik. He went with his car, with a lorry to the government quarters in central Oslo, and parked his lorry there and detonated a bomb inside the lorry where a lot of people were killed, and the whole government, a couple of government buildings were just completely destroyed. And he wasn't captured. He took his car and then he took a boat to an island outside Oslo where hundreds of social democratic youths and young teenagers were celebrating a summer camp. He went over, said first he was a policeman, then he took his rifles, his fast-speed rifles out of his... Then he took his fast-speed rifles and he started hunting and killing teenagers. He killed them all. Everybody that was in his reach, he killed, and he listened. While he was killing, he listened to opera music in his headphones It's a horrible thing that happened in Oslo, Norway. And Åsne Seierstad, who is a great Norwegian journalist and a great Norwegian writer, she has meticulously researched the life of Anders Behring Breivik, and she has meticulously researched the lives of some of his victims and of the parents of his victims. And what many Norwegians want to call the horrible terrorist attack of a maniac, of a crazy man, she has described in this book with the smashing title, One of Us. Åsne Seierstad, One of Us, is a book that, the 10th book that I want to recommend to you, because she's giving a Norwegian biography of Anders Behring Breivik, and she says in the book, this guy is one of us. And we have to accept that. We have to acknowledge that one of us, of our middle, committed these horrendous crimes. This is a book that makes you cry. This is a book that makes you angry again. But it's also a very important book about an incredible story. The story of Anders Breivik and the massacre in Norway. It says here in English. In the English edition, it was published by Virago in London. And Åsne Seierstad, as I said, is a very charismatic person and journalist. Anders Behring Breivik is still in jail, and his horrific deeds have changed the lives of hundreds of families forever and ever. So much hate. Where does it come from? It's also a question that this book tries to examine. So these were my 10 books, my 10 non-fiction books that you should read in November. I hope that you pick up one of them or two of them. Maybe you have read already one of them or two of them or three of them. Please let me know in the comments down below. And please, if you don't already do subscribe to the channel, subscribe to my channel, because you help me creating more content and reach out to more people who I might get in contact with. Because I want to get in contact with you, and with you. And want to hear your opinion, want to hear your thoughts. We should connect. Thank you very much for watching this video. I come back very soon with another video on Sunday, maybe even 2 videos on Sunday, we'll see. Until then, I wish you stay safe for reasons that everybody of us knows. I talk about that more as usual on Sunday in my weekly wrap-up. Thank you very much. Goodbye.